Hello, everybody. Welcome back to me. I've been away for a while dealing with some school stuff and doctoral studies and dealing with deaths in the family and traveling and synod issues and all of those kinds of things. So, have been gone. I'm here now, and I will be gone again, but hopefully, all things going according to plan, there will be episodes running for you, even in my absence physically from this place, as you see me here. So, looking today at monastic vows, we're still kind of marching to the end of the Augsburg Confession, trying to get there, trying to get to the end of it. And once we do so, we're going to break into the Schmalkald articles. We're going to have an amazing time. But for now, looking at this, well, what is this? I hear all the time people say monks, monasteries, that's not Lutheran. We got rid of those. That's Article 27 of the Augsburg Confession that we hate monks and want them all to die and stuff. And I say, no, not really. Have you read the articles? Have you read the concerns? A lot of people, as I've been saying through this whole kind of series at the end of the Augsburg Confession, dealing with these things which we in the Lutheran Church see as abuses. The concern is never the thing done itself, with invocation of saints, with fasting, the distinction among meats, with the Mass. The problem is not the thing itself. The problem is not wearing of vestments itself. The problem is not fasting itself. The problem is not monks themselves, but attaching to these things the false belief that they are divinely ordained by God through people, right? That it's a sin not to do them, that by doing them, they are meriting righteousness and the justification that only comes through Christ, and so basically, every single one of these things is always coming back to, I know, big chagrin to the Reformed people, it's always coming back to the article on justification. Are we justified freely by the grace of God through in because of prop there, Christian, because of Jesus Christ? Or is this about us doing whatever it is, whether that be a law actually of God, or whether that be something instituted by the church that we pretend is instituted by God, in the hopes, in the belief, in the heretical assumption that by doing these things we merit for ourselves justification? Now, of course, the big question in the room along all of these things is, does Rome teach that? Completely irrelevant question. Because Rome is a moving target, as I have said through this whole series, as I have been having to say as these conversations start coming up more and more and more because of the Pope Francis dying and Pope Leo becoming the Pope and all of these kinds of things. And, maybe even skipping Schmalkald articles and going right into power and primacy of the Pope after this might be a good idea to do just to get all of that out of the way. But a lot of people, they forget that all of these articles, all of them, the one on the invocation of saints, the one on the distinction among foods, the one on monks, everything, the actual issue, not about the Pope's chair of St. Peter, so called, not about monks not getting married or living in the hills. Like, of course, a lot of these things, they can be seen as issues, but they're not the issue. The issue is justification, freely given in had through Jesus Christ by grace. Okay, starting from the top. Melanchthon writes, in speaking of monastic vows, now, stop there. You say, well, why stop there? Monastic vows, not monks, not monasteries, not monastic lifestyle, but monastic, what? Say it with me, vows. Now, what is that? A monastic vow is the promise before God that is assumed to be legally binding in a sense, which says to God, to yourself, to all witnessing, you will never change this lifestyle, in the hopes that, and this isn't the necessary part, but this is the way that it was understood by those speaking against what Melanchthon is speaking against here, in the hopes that that vow and your obedience to it, this new law which you have put in place as an act toward God, as a self-willed, man-made sort of worship, will be accepted by God if you obey it and will become meritorious for justification. Again, the question everyone's always asking, does Rome actually teach this? Blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. Do they? I'm not really sure if they do currently, if they ever did. It's hard to say. I don't know, right? What I do know is that this is what Melanchthon was claiming was happening in his time. Can we verify that? No. But can we agree with Melanchthon that this is a serious issue? Absolutely. Like if someone's doing this, this is a serious issue. So he says, and speaking of these vows, not of monks, not of monasteries, not of the monastic lifestyle, it is necessary, first of all, to consider how they are viewed earlier, what kind of life there was in the monasteries. Now, he's going to speak of the monasteries themselves and of that lifestyle, and how much happened in them daily that was contrary not only to God's word, but also to papal canons. So he's setting up here the kind of picture. He's speaking of the vows, and this is what the article says it's actually about. It's about vows, right? Keep that in mind. But he is going to be talking about the life that these monks are living, about the monasteries, about what's happening to them and in there. And he's saying the things that were happening, were being done, were being believed, were contrary not only to the scriptures teaching, but even to that of the Roman Catholic Pope at the time and his canons, not the one living, but the office in continuity with itself. He says, for at the time of St. Augustine, and in which monasteries did exist, and he was one of them, he says, monastic vocations were voluntary, which is true. And if you go to a Lutheran monastery, and people say, a Lutheran monastery, haven't they read Article 27 of the Augsburg Confession? Yeah, it's this, right? It's the one that says, that acknowledges that the early church father that we cite the most in our confession of faith was one of those people, right? And if you go there, you'll see their vows are voluntary. They're not vows in the sense of the people that Melanchthon was speaking against, right? He says later, when proper discipline and teaching became corrupted because of that corruption, because of the laxity, because of people coming in and out and blah, 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 he says monastic vows were contrived, like strict ones, right? And so he says, with them, as in a prison of their own devising, people wanted to restore discipline. Now, what's the problem with this? This is something we always run into, that we're always tempted with when people become lax, whether that's ourselves or other people. I see this in our church in North America, at least online, tends to be mostly ourselves. Um, where someone says, I've really fallen away from the things I need to be doing. I haven't been praying the daily offices. I haven't been reading my scriptures. I haven't been praying enough. I haven't been going to church every single week. I haven't been going to Bible study. So they try and do this huge 180 turn, and they start fasting, and they start going to these accountability groups and coming to confession every week or every month, and they start doing all these amazing things, admittedly, amazing things, right? But why are they doing them? They think that something's wrong with them, and definitely something is, but they think they can fix it with discipline. And what do they mean by discipline? By some sort of action in the mode of the law. That the law is the thing that's going to fix them. The law is the thing that's going to fix their conscience. The law is the thing that's going to wipe them clean. Bad news, buddy. It's not going to, right? And Luther writes beautifully of this in his Galatians commentary. The thing which cleanses the conscience is the Holy Gospel. The thing which makes your life useful to others in the world is the law. Don't get the two things confused, right? And so he goes on with them as in a prison of their own devising. What is this? It's not a bondage that you were found in. It's a bondage you did to yourself. And you did that to yourself because you thought it would free you, but it didn't, right? And a lot of people are like this. You know those people who say they identify as cripples? And then they're not, and then they get the doctors to cripple them. Well, now you are, right? This is the thing. A lot of people, they feel broken, so they apply the law. Well, what is the law given for, right? St. Paul teaches Romans 5:21 or 5:20. The law was given to increase sin. Well, if you say I have all these sins, I need to apply the law. No, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to get worse, right? If you feel condemned, you think you're going to feel less condemned by applying more commands to break? No, right? No. And so we fall into this prison of our own devising. We end up in this bondage of our own doing. We end up crushed by condemnations that didn't come from God, but they came from ourselves, right? And all this because we wanted to restore discipline, right? And yet we are the ones that fail to uphold the discipline. If you fail in a little, you will fail in a lot. But a lot of people, they don't understand that. They can't really grab, for whatever reason. Me too, right? We also fall into this when we do that with other people. And this maybe used to be more of a problem You still kind of hear this stuff going on with some older folks, and I'm not saying that whole demographic is the problem, but it tended to come from a culture that was a little more pure, and a culture that cared a little bit more for seemliness and for being a good person, less selfish, and in those ways, that is a better culture than the thing we have now. But it was very graceless. And so what you would hear a lot, and you still do hear it a lot from people, is judgments about other people and calls to the pastor asking him to increase discipline because so and so is lax, so and so isn't dressing well, so and so isn't tithing. And so they say, Pastor, can you do a sermon about tithing? Pastor, can you do a sermon about wearing your Sunday best? Pastor, can you do a sermon about this? Well, what's the goal? I need to see behavior modification in my neighbors. Right? But what does that do? If we want to engage in law stuff, chasing the law, to clean up other people's acts, to cut other people, don't be surprised when it cuts you too. Oh, he moves on. In addition to monastic vows, many other things were introduced, and a great number of bonds and burdens were laid on many before they had attained an appropriate age. And what does this mean? Kids. Kids. Now, this is something that is commonly known, understood, spoken about, and it has to deal with, like, if you couldn't feed your kids, you just throw a couple of them in the monastery or the nunnery, and not only then would that kid survive, you wouldn't have to pay for them. Kind of like free childcare, like forever, but also he would pray for you and get you into heaven regardless of kind of what you do. And now, is that something that Rome ever taught? No, that's definitely not something Rome ever taught. But is it something Roman laity did and believed? Yes. Yes, yes, they did. And we have far too much textual evidence to say alternatively, right? Now I'm just gonna pull up some art for you guys so that we can make sure that the Book of Concord over here is in the right section. Um, you can look at the sacred art of Caravaggio. So beautiful. I'm a huge fan. Oh, Caravaggio, your art is gorgeous. Okay. Now what are we looking at here? Okay. So he says, in addition to this, what does this mean? In addition to being in bondage out of the law of your own choosing that you placed upon your own selves, you also have this great perversion whereby these vows, which didn't need to exist, they are the bondage of your own choosing, are placed on people who can't even consent to them, who don't even want them. You're deciding the fate of these kids before they could even comprehend what they are being fated to do. He says many persons also entered monastic life in ignorance. They, maybe not because they were too young. Although they were not too young, some were, some weren't. Maybe they're stupid. Maybe they don't have. Maybe they just didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they just made a mistake. Maybe they thought they had enough spiritual fortitude to do it, but they didn't. A lot of people are like this, right? How many New Year's Day services do you think I have to endure? And then here afterward, oh pastor, come see my Bible reading plan for this. Oh pastor, come see what I'm gonna do with my prayer rule for this new year. Oh pastor, I promise I'm gonna be at every single midweek vespers. Oh you know what I'm saying, right? And how many do it? None. Okay, none. It doesn't happen. So if this is with if this is with the small things, what's going to happen with the whole life of the monastic lifestyle? Not going to go well. They nevertheless, he says, did not sufficiently estimate and understand their capabilities. It's the problem. We think we're greater than we are, and this doesn't just have to do with monastic life, it has to do with everything. The only difference is a lot of the time we don't make vows with everything. But even so, with things we do make vows to, I hear people talk about all the time, oh yeah, I want to be on council. And I think in my head, oh, you shouldn't. You shouldn't do it. Or they say, oh, I want to be a deacon, I want to be a pastor, and everyone's looking around saying, it's not a mean thing to say you don't have what it takes. Some people just don't, right? Where I hear from people who Oh, they can't make it out to Bible studies, to this service, to that service. And they say, I want to be a pastor. Well, why? Well, because I like theology. Okay, good for you. You like theology. That doesn't mean you love people. It doesn't mean you want to be around the dying. It doesn't mean, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean you're willing to sit there and counsel the depressed and the downtrodden people who want to commit suicide. It doesn't mean that, right? You have to be careful when you calculate, when you estimate, when you see if you are what is needed to fit whatever role it is. People who are getting married, they're making these vows, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not, and this is the thing, like, it's also one of the important things why when people do get married, they go to premarital counseling so that if there is a problem, the pastor can make it known and say, I'm not sure that you should do this. Or, also with that whole seminary discussion that's coming up now. I think it was the president of the Fort Wayne one, could be wrong. Or maybe it was the one whoever was talking on issues, etc. about it, or maybe it was that because there's been a lot written now. And I think one of the greatest points that was made was in-person seminaries that are connected to the synod. You have pastors that are invested in this um, endeavor, not just to train and equip with the assumption that you should do the job, but to see if you are the one that should do that job. If you are the one that should fill that role. And that's not something that you say, well, I did the degree, I did the classes, I passed with an A minus, good enough, right? No, not necessarily, right? Your grades are not the only thing being graded. Also is your spiritual maturity, your care for others, your zeal for the lost, right? All of these kinds of things are seen mainly by other people, much, much more than they are seen by ourselves. And it's the same way with something like monastic life. How do you think you're going to know if you have the capabilities to do that? So oftentimes what should happen and does happen in a lot of monasteries that are not abusive, including the Roman ones now, um, you will go and they will watch you and you're not making vows yet and you're going to be there a year, 2 years, 3 years, then you'll make a minor vow and this vow will be whatever it is. And I'm not saying the permanent vows are good. I'm just saying they do them in a way where you can't make them just like that and your parents can't force you into it. You can't make mistakes there. Um, although we could also say as Lutherans, all of those vows are mistakes, but that's just me. So he says all of those were entangled and ensnared in this way, and they were forced and compelled to remain in such bondage, in spite of the fact that even papal canons would have set many of them free. And this is his point. These abuses are not things that are within Roman thought, and this is why, again, Roman thought. What is Roman thought? Well, who determines Roman thought, right? Um, Always in the mind of Lutherans, we're going back to the earlier church documents. And that doesn't even mean early church. That just means, like, for example, Melanchthon's pointing to the papal canons. They weren't written that early, right? And so what he's doing is he's pointing to the things already written, already agreed upon, already established as doctrinal and praxeological realities. Whereas what Rome was doing, whether it was making decrees about, and this is why the other thing is people say, does Rome teach that? Well, it's not necessarily about what's taught. It's also about what's done, right? And I acknowledge, of course, there can be churches that will teach something and do something else, and that's bad. But we need to have compassion and understanding for those situations. But if those things are not punished, but under the table they're rewarded, that's a problem, right? And so Melanchthon's point here to those he's pleading with to say that no, we are not differing from Rome, which is in that little paragraph that's between the articles and the of doctrine and the disputed abuses, is he's making the claim, just as he did there, we're not differing from Rome. We're not differing from the Catholic Church.